Rising Waters, a CBS 21 News flood special, is presented by Abel & Son Roofing.
Well, it causes the most damage during severe weather, and it can happen no matter where you live, flooding. And in this CBS 21 News special, we're taking you to the worst spots for flooding in central PA, explaining what you need to know to stay safe and busting some of those myths when it comes to flood insurance. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Russell.
And I'm Meteorologist Ed Russo.
And I'm Meteorologist Steve Knight. Well, just recently we saw the impact flooding can have on people. Apartment units in Lower Paxton Township were actually condemned.
So we'll start with a closer look at why central PA is so susceptible to flooding. Why is central PA so flood prone? Well, we all live in a floodplain. Yep, the Susquehanna River is the focal point, and everything drains into it. Smaller rivers like the Juniata, all the big creeks like the Swatara, Connedaguinet, and Yellow Breeches, and all the little creeks and tributaries that carry water from your neighborhood back to the Susquehanna. So heavy rains, perhaps from a tropical storm, can overwhelm these waterways and cause big problems. But so can afternoon thunderstorms, creating runoff that can challenge nature's drainage system. We come along and build in the way of these natural water highways. Maybe we move some earth or divert a stream or build a bridge that restricts water flow. It all affects where that water can go. Water flow is vital to our way of life here in central PA, from our beautiful river views to fun recreation like fishing and swimming. Flooding is a natural part of our weather pattern. How we adapt and mitigate the threat is key to a vibrant way of life now and long into the future. And really, guys, that's why it takes planning to think ahead. Whether you're planning a new development or you're maybe taking care of an old property, you have to know what's flooded in the past and what might change it in the future, right?
Yeah, knowing the history and just Pennsylvania in general, the topography. You got the ridges and valleys that really helps funnel the water, which can cause some problems when you get a lot of rain.
Yeah, and sure, that's one of the things we always take a look at as well, is just the fact that progress is progress, but sometimes that progress comes at the expense of there are things that happen and developments that happen in areas that maybe are a little bit more flood prone in an area that didn't used to have kind of buildings and properties on it. So it can be a tricky thing moving forward for the future.
So that's a look at why we see flooding in central PA, but there are a couple locations that get hit especially hard.
Yeah, I had to come up with this top 5 list. So here's the top 5 worst spots for our flooding in our region. Take a look.
All of central PA is susceptible to flooding, but certain areas are often more likely to see high water. When the mighty Susquehanna swells, the first area to flood is Shinepoke in Harrisburg. Shinepoke is a small neighborhood in South Harrisburg, tucked in by the South Bridge. But because it sits lower, it floods easily. As a matter of fact, many homes are built up on the second level so the underneath can flood without incident. Number 2, the Yellow Breeches Creek. Winding through the borough of New Cumberland, Bridge Street can often be a victim of a flooded Yellow Breeches. Of course, this creek extends into some roadways and neighborhoods along its banks. Number 3, homes along the Connedaguinet. With all its twists and turns, many neighborhoods were built along the Connedaguinet Creek, resulting in backyards and homes in the path of flooding. The picturesque backdrop is too hard to resist, but creates headaches when too much rain comes along. Number 4, Cameron Street near the Farm Show. Development along the Paxton Creek in Harrisburg has resulted in an ongoing battle against a rising tide every time it rains. How many times have we shown you cars flooded out near the Farm Show complex? Recently, money has been allotted to mitigate some of this flooding. Number 5, Hershey. Not just because of the Swatara Creek often cresting its banks, but many areas of Hershey are susceptible to flooding, including Hershey Park. As the small town grew, old drainage pipes and infrastructure could not keep up. Derry Township spent a lot of time and money to mitigate flooding after Tropical Storm Lee in 2011.
Yeah, I think the big thing is these communities, as they grow, they have this old infrastructure. In Pennsylvania, it might be 100 years old. I mean, there's literally pipes in Harrisburg that are made of wood.
Yeah.
And after time they just crumble. So infrastructure is one thing. Where else did I forget?
Well, I don't think it's so much that you forgot. We're just talking about the top 5. So I know there's probably some people like screaming at their TV going, wait a minute, whoa,
what about us?
What about us? But Sherman Creek, Shermansdale.
All right. And that's the one that occurs really quickly and comes down really quickly.
Comes down really quickly as well.
That's a good point. How about
down in York, there's one stretch of road, Indian Rock Dam Road, which is along Cadorus, notoriously.
Notorious.
for high water.
Right.
Even when the area didn't get a whole lot of rain, that is in a floodplain. I mean, it's very flat surrounding the creek. So any little rise, water will just overflow.
And the Conestoga River in Lancaster
County, absolutely. There's a lot of spots there that take on some really high water when they get big time rains. Well, of course, we're talking about the major spots. Even if you don't live in those top 5 spots, it doesn't mean you're fully in the clear. Flooding is something that can happen anywhere and in a flash. When it comes to flooding, and in particular flash flooding, it's important to understand that no area is safe or immune. You don't have to live in a designated flood-prone area to experience potentially deadly and devastating flooding.
Most flash flooding is caused by slow-moving or stalled thunderstorms, by thunderstorms repeatedly moving over the same area, or by heavy rains from hurricanes and tropical storms. Heavy sustained rain can create rapid flooding within a few hours or even minutes, and flooding can even occur miles away from where the rain fell. Flash floods can sweep away cars, tear out trees, and destroy homes, businesses, and roadways. As little as 6 inches of rapidly moving floodwater can knock a person down. Often there is very little advance warning that these sudden and deadly floods are coming, and most flooding fatalities in the United States happen in flash floods. Driving and flooding is a very dangerous combination. Nearly all of flash flood fatalities are auto-related. If driving in heavy rain, pay particular attention for flooding in any low-lying areas and bridge underpasses. We always stress the phrase, turn around, don't drown, as the depth of the water is not always obvious and the road itself may be washed out. If a vehicle stalls in high water, leave it immediately and seek higher ground. Rapidly rising water can engulf a vehicle and sweep it away. Finally, make sure you stay informed. If a flash flood warning is issued for your area, immediately get to higher ground if possible, and if you're advised to evacuate, don't hesitate and do so immediately. Meteorologist Steve Knight, CBS 21 News.
We're often thinking about, I'm near a creek, so I have to be worried about flash flooding. But sometimes you get flash flooding that has nothing to do with the creek.
Right.
It's just you have a lot of heavy rain that's falling over concrete, which can't readily absorb the water. And, we had an incident in Lower Paxton Township of an apartment complex where the water just couldn't get absorbed by the ground because it was falling so heavy. And you just got this rushing water up high against the actual windows.
Yeah, there was a window, and there was also a retaining wall. Mm-hmm. And then the township's pointing at the apartment complex. They're pointing at the township. It's really nobody's fault. It's just overwhelmed the system.
And you have to think a concrete retaining wall, especially if the drainage can't handle it, it's going to fill up with water pretty fast.
Yeah, it really acts like a funnel.
Yeah, and that was really the main point that we're trying to make with talking about flash flooding is that it can happen anywhere. You think that you may be immune. You aren't. It's something that can happen anywhere at any time with the right weather conditions. So it's something that we all have to be aware of throughout all of central Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so when flooding happens, there are a number of things you can do to keep yourself safe.
But it's not just during the event that you have to worry about.
Yeah, I'm going to show you what you need to keep in mind during and after flooding happens. We'll have that coming up. Flooding can be costly and deadly. It was just a few months ago when a 10-year-old died after getting swept away in the Yellow Breaches. The Fish and Boat Commission says Matthew Coffroth Jr. went kayaking with friends and family after a major rain event when the creek was running higher than normal. And they say he wasn't wearing a life jacket when he fell out of the kayak. We all certainly remember
such a tragedy.
That story here locally. Well, that's just one instance that highlights the fact that safety concerns can continue long after rain stops falling.
So here's a look at how you can stay safe during and after flooding.
When floodwaters recede, the damage left behind can be devastating and present many dangers. While the images we often see depict destruction of buildings and homes, what you can't see can be just as dangerous.
Floodwaters often become contaminated with sewage or chemicals. Gas leaks and power lines can be deadly and aren't always obvious at first glance. The best thing you can do after a flood is to stay informed. Make sure you are up to date on local road conditions. You may also be asked to boil your water. Carbon monoxide poisoning is one of the leading causes of death when areas are dealing with power outages, and most utility companies have apps that can update you on getting your service back. Completely avoid floodwaters. Standing water hides many dangers, including toxins and chemicals. There may also be dangerous debris or sharp objects below the surface. Finally, avoid all recreation on area creeks, streams, and rivers until all are safely below flood stage, and this can take several days after an initial flood. Boating, kayaking, or swimming in waters that are above flood stage is not safe even for those with experience. The best practice is to always wait for the all clear from local authorities that it is okay to resume any and all normal activities around your home or waterways after a flood. Meteorologist Steve Knight, CBS 21 News.
You know, I think going back to the life jacket situation, you know, we all have one when we go on a boat or a kayak, and a lot of us are guilty of not actually putting it on.
Yeah, you throw it underneath the seat, or
it's useless if you're not wearing it. I liken it to this analogy. You know, you're not going to have time to put on your seatbelt as your car is crashing.
Sure.
You're not going to have time to put on your life jacket as you're falling off the boat, because most people think subconsciously that they're just going to have time to do all of those things.
Right.
I mean, would you put on your bike helmet as you're falling off your bike? No. So it's a life jacket is a proactive step, and we're all guilty of not necessarily being as proactive as we should be, wearing it as soon as you get onto the water, especially with any kind of vessel.
Yes. So, some of that video you were showing there, Steve, we flooded pretty bad in 1998 when we lived in Florida. And the worst thing about flooding in a home environment is the mold that results, and it happens like that, especially if it's in the warm season.
Yeah.
And it's just awful because you're fighting against time. You know, you're trying to salvage things, but you're also trying to prevent the mold that will grow exponentially if you don't get ahead of it quickly.
Yeah, and I don't think folks realize that if you do get water in your home, your walls actually act as a wick. And that water
drywall grabs it.
Rises just like a candle wick. So the drywall grabs it, and it doesn't take a whole lot of water in your home to really cause problems.
And it just stays forever. It's one of those.
Yeah, the after effects can linger with this.
And that's
kind
why
of
it does take months to years to clean up. All right, you can also help yourself by making sure that you have flood insurance.
Yeah, I'm breaking down the common myths of getting flood insurance after the break.
And welcome back. You've seen that flooding can happen pretty much anywhere in central PA, which is why flood insurance is so necessary.
Yeah, so we're clearing up some common myths and misconceptions about flood insurance. Take a look. Flood insurance is something you want to consider not just for the property your home sits on, but perhaps your business as well, especially if it's a commercial property. Here's some common myths regarding flood insurance. Myth number one, you can't buy flood insurance if you're in a higher risk area. That is false. Most communities in the United States participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, which more than likely means your property is eligible for coverage. The National Flood Insurance Program specifically targets areas that are more susceptible to flooding, like Cameron Street and some of the properties along Front Street that normally flood, especially when we get heavy rain that causes the Susquehanna to swell. We all know that in a good thunderstorm, Cameron Street is very vulnerable to flooding. It's notorious for that. Now, your premium may run higher in those areas, but you're still often eligible for at least some coverage. All right, myth number two, your homeowner's policy covers flood insurance. All right, many homeowners' policies don't have flood insurance included, so it's very important that you must add it on. And if you live outside of a susceptible area, the insurance cost is usually pretty affordable. Okay, myth number three, flood insurance is only available for homeowners. That's not true. There is coverage for your business as well. This is something to think about when you have another physical address that is the location of your business. Make sure that whatever policy you decide to end up getting not only covers the physical structure of your home or property, but also the contents, like all of your possessions that exist within it. Meteorologist Ed Russo reporting, CBS 21 News.
All right, great stuff there, Ed. It's really important to know that it's not covered by your regular home insurance,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you'd think that it would. That's the assumption that gets people into trouble. Sure. And then when you have an incident happen, you go to apply for the benefits of it, and you're denied because you don't even have flood insurance because it's not included in the policy. There's 22,000 communities in the U.S. that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And basically what that means is even if you're in a high-risk area that's susceptible to flooding, you still will have coverage. Now your premium's probably going to be higher as a result.
Yeah, like Florida and those places.
Right, but you still, in essence, will have coverage. A lot of people assume, and intuitively it makes sense, that why would I be insured for something in an area where this disaster is more likely to happen?
Right.
And insurance is not going to want to cover that if the probability is high, but there is funding through the National Flood Insurance Program to basically make sure that everybody has access.
Some coverage, right?
Yeah, and recently, we had stories of folks that were affected by the remnants of Debbie, and they did not have their own individual flood insurance. Meanwhile, nobody from the government, state or federal, stepped in to declare any kind of a disaster. So they're kind of twisting in the wind a little bit.
And you need that in order to get the certain funding to be accessible. So the other thing about flood insurance, and remember this, is it's different if it rises. In other words, like a normal flood that we think about, or if a wall gets blown in or your roof will blow off and then you flood, that's completely different kind of coverage.
Yeah, so it really comes in down to, well, how did this disaster on your home happen? You just want to make sure you have all your bases covered. And I touched this in the story, is you want to make sure that you not only cover the structural damage of your home, but also what's inside your home, your possessions, your content. So if you're just getting structural coverage and you have all thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment inside your home that's ruined by flooding, that won't necessarily be covered. So you have to make sure you're covered structurally and the contents within your home as well.
Good advice. Now, you guys are sick of me talking about this, but here we are talking about flooding. I feel we're way overdue in Central PA. So if you remember my timeline, the 96, 2004, 2011, we had bad flooding in 2018, mainly in York County.
Correct.
But I think we're way overdue for a big flood.
Yeah, a big flood along the Susquehanna. And
right, exactly.
And that's when things, York County was a very localized flood that took place in and around the Accomack area. But, 2011, to your point, Tom, and you and I we were both sitting in this room covering it. 2011 was the last time we had a major flood on the Susquehanna. So we are overdue. Obviously, fingers crossed that we stay overdue for a very long time.
For it, that's right.
Yeah, but we are overdue for a major flood on the Susquehanna.
And since 2018, we've just been in minor flood stage along the Susquehanna, I believe. We actually haven't hit moderate stage. I mean, in 2018, I think we did, but...
Yeah, close to it.
Yeah.
So the playoff of that is that since then, even 2011, we've built all these new developments, these big warehouses that we see. That changes where that water can go. So it's nobody's fault. I'm not against development, but we have to factor in that things that didn't flood before are going to flood next time because we've changed where water goes.
Got to be smart about it.
Yeah, incredible stuff. So.
Yeah.
All right, we will be back with the final word coming up next. Stay with us.
Well, if you missed any of our reports, you can watch them at CBS21.com.
Yeah, make sure you have the CBS 21 weather app downloaded to make sure you get alerts when bad weather does hit.
All right, a couple of takeaways before we go. Respect water. It always wins. Water always wins is a good reminder. And number two, turn around, don't drown. How many times have we said that in our career? Such a simple thing. Don't put yourself in harm's way.
Make sure you're insured.
Thank you so much for joining us for our CBS 21 Flood Special. Thanks for watching.
Rising Waters, a CBS 21 News flood special, was presented by Abel & Sons Roofing.